welcome to this episode, the resilience one of the Women Talking About Learning podcast. I'm Andrew Jacobs. First of all, a happy new year for 2025. Following the recent Christmas break, are you ready for this year? Maybe you want to hear about how to prepare for it. If that's the case, then you're in luck. We have two tremendous guests this time. Our first guest is Carly Cunningham. Creative strategist and growth accelerator, Carly develops brand leaders by taking businesses from overcrowded competitive spaces into blue ocean territory where they can confidently stand out and thrive. She has an international client base that benefits from accelerated growth, profit, and stability through her support. Our second guest is Lisa Bedell. Lisa is a global leader on simplification, collaboration, and innovation, and helps organizations transform performance by reimagining the work. Lisa is the author of 2 books, Why Simple Wins and Kill the Company. As well as speaking and writing globally, Lisa serves on the board of advisors for several organizations, including the Global Agenda Council for the World Economic Forum, the United States National Security Agency, the Association of Professional Futurists, and Novartis. We were completely absorbed in this conversation, and we hope you will be too. Recorded in November of 2024, this is Women Talking About Learning. This is Carly and Lisa talking about resilience.
Hey, Carly, it's so nice to meet you.
It's fabulous to meet you, Lisa. In fact, I realized coming into this, I know nothing about you. So I'm really excited about this conversation and our ability to be curious and just dive right in. I think this is going to be fun.
I think we were just laughing too, because we've had a little bit of a conversation already.
Yes.
And we realized already 50 minutes in, we hadn't hit record. So we are definitely resilient people. And we're going to be having a great conversation here again. I think it's a good thing for us to do, just to set the groundwork here, talk about why are we here? You know, it was great. We were talking with Andrew about the podcast is about resilience and women and leadership. And let me just ask you, why did you want to come on the podcast anyway?
One, the topic really intrigued me. And as a like yourself, 20-year entrepreneur, 20-plus year entrepreneur, as a former elite level athlete, I used to race cross-country mountain bike, and I still ride as much as I can every week. Resilience is something that it's like I get to debrief it. Like, what is it? And because I know it, I feel it in my body. But I was like, this is going to be really interesting. And then to get someone else's perspective on the macro, really, if we look at the macro level of my purpose, it's to be of service. And supporting women, helping women learn, lifting them up is really important to me. And so it all just, way out of my topic genre of what I usually talk about. But I was like, heck yes, that is something I want to be in conversation about. Yourself?
I agree with you. I know we were chatting as we were getting ready for this podcast. I mean, to me, it's supporting women's issues is important for a few reasons. One is because the people that have helped me, I want to help pass it on to others. And I don't want other women to struggle with the same barriers that I have, right? And so, as I was saying before, I really like to quote Madeleine Albright's quote that she's famous for, which is there's a special place in hell for women that don't help other women. I don't know why we want to do that, because we have to work twice as hard in so many ways.
Yes.
And, I dream of a day where I am selected for boards and for keynote rosters based on me and my thought leadership first, and not that, oh my gosh, we need a woman.
Mm-hmm.
That still happens today. And it bothers me, right? Because I want to be selected for who I am, not for what I am. And so that was one of the reasons that I wanted to come on here, because I really think what Andrew's doing in supporting women is important, because we're not there yet, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So this is something interesting. We were talking about resilience and you being an elite athlete. What do you think makes you resilient?
Falling down repeatedly over and over and over again.
That's true.
It is true. If you look at it, well, let's look at the sports I've done. My first sport was figure skating. I, at the age of 6 or 7, was selected in a I don't know what they call them, but a selection program, much like you hear about the programs in China where the kids are selected at crazy early ages because they see potential. So I was selected at the age of 6 or 7 to be trained as one of the next top pairs figure skaters in the world. I was skating for the 3rd top club in the world. So, I skated from the age of 5 or 6 through till 12. There was a whole realization at the age of 12 that led me to quit. And fortunately, my parents gave me that choice after investing so much into, right?
Oh, yeah.
100%. And so, figure skating, you fall. Horseback riding was my next sport. You fall a significantly long way off the horse, or, the horse stops at the jump and you go flying over it solo. And then I chose mountain biking. So, I've had a lot of hard falls, but one of the things that I've learned to do in the first sport is how to fall. You can't fall to the ice because it's really hard, stiff and rigid because it hurts more. So learning to relax into a fall. I mean, remember, also pairs figure skating. My job was to be the human that was being thrown or lifted through the air. You're going to fall.
Wait, this is interesting. It's like learning how to fall, because so many of us think of like fall, right? But if we learn how to fall better, that's really interesting. So say more about that.
Well, what comes up for me now in this live debrief, effectively, and thinking about it is I am not just learning how to relax into a fall and to be supple so that you aren't damaging your body more, is what are you protecting? Right? And in figure skating, it's your head. And in mountain biking, you're protecting whatever is flying towards, the branch that's sticking out or the rock. What are you protecting yourself? What is the most thing that needs to be most protected? And I think that's a really valuable lesson in entrepreneurship and business. When your business is in a fall mode, when things are in a downward spiral mode, if you will, what is it that you need to protect? Is it your IP? Is it your cash flow? Is it your people? And one of the things that I learned through coaching mountain biking, teaching women how to ride, and just riding with women in general, is they're afraid to fall. That is the biggest barrier in mountain biking, is I'm afraid to fall. I'm afraid I'm going to hurt myself. And I'm like, well, honey, let me tell you, you're going to fall. So let's talk about falling.
So that's really cool. Yeah, because if if you fall right, then you can get back up. Why do you? I'm thinking a lot about what you're saying, because it's one thing is to learn how to fall, but the other thing is like just trying in the first place. If you're afraid to fall, you're not even going to try. So you think that is that a big barrier, you think, for us as women?
100%.
We're just afraid to fall.
Thinking about that, my question, and maybe this one's for you, is the fear of falling tied to imposter syndrome?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I mean, that's my first gut reaction, but let me think about that. And I experience that a lot. I mean, people say that to me, oh, you have imposter syndrome? How can that be? And I'm like, if you're inside my head on a daily basis, you might understand. I mean, it's just one of those things you're conditioned to have. You're not good enough. I'm going to be found out. And not that men don't have this either, but I think women are particularly conditioned, right? That you're not going to, you better try twice as hard. You better be perfect, or you're not going to get the next step. And that's why I think a lot of people are afraid to fall, because if I can only get half of the way, it's not about trying. It's about trying, to me, is doing all of it, not just trying. So that is a big difference, I think, with men and women, is that if I try means I've got to be the best and I've got to succeed and I need to win, versus just trying. Trying, and I think we've been conditioned this way, trying isn't going to get us anywhere. Women are not advanced based on their ability. Men are, right? Their potential. We are advanced based on our results, and our results have to be twice.
Based on our level of perfection, really. There's one thing that Seth Godin talks about that I have been practicing and falling down on, and that is shipping my work. And in the context, essentially it's the 80-20 rule. Get it to 80%, get it out the door, ship it. I have trouble shipping it because if you also look at the sports I've done, figure skating, you look at the judging. It was never just about how skilled you were. It was in our age category, from 7 to 12, the cutest pair won. The pair with who is the most attractive with the most attractive outfits won over the equal pair who was just as skilled. There's that artistic component. Well, there's so much more in a bias that shows up with that, right? So with women, I said this in my last keynote. I said, one of the reasons we're so afraid as women and we struggle so much to put ourselves out there as a personal brand, as a company brand, is because our mothers looked at us. And I know guys have said, yeah, my mom did that to me too. But when we went to leave the house, our mothers would look at us and go, you're not going out looking like that, are you?
Yeah.
Like, how often do we face those types of questions? Whereas guys, it was like, well, you look like a slob, but see you later. There was no aspect of that. So that to me is really interesting. And guys are just open to trying, which is, to me, just ship it, see what happens, test and measure. It's what I preach to my clients all the time. And I get caught in the press send button or press go live or press post because it's not perfect.
Well, so how did you get over that? That's interesting because it's like, I want to think about, okay, so if somebody was sitting here listening to this and they were a young woman and I wanted to teach them how to be more resilient, like what are the things we can tell them to do? So yeah, just don't be perfect. Don't let perfect get in the enemy of the good. That's true.
Yes, I love that saying. Practice. When I think to my yoga practice, which is far waning at the moment, but when I was in practice, one of the things the instructor said to me that has always stuck with me is your practice today, even if you're doing the same asana sequence, the same movement sequence, is going to be different than yesterday because you're just different today. Your body, the aspects of, parts of your body are stiffer today. I might have fallen off my mountain bike and, I have a big bruise on my quad, so I can't get into that position. So it's always different and ever changing. So you show up to practice. And that practice teaches you things if you're open to the learning. So if we think back to the shipping, if you can just get it out the door and be open to the feedback that comes, and there's always going to be criticisms. I mean, we live in such a critical society with fast feedback now, it's inevitable. So just accept that that's going to come and choose what you're looking at. Choose to anchor into and absorb the helpful.
Yeah.
And then tweak one thing or two things in your next video, your next post, your next blog, and you get progressively better. I have a friend who does an amazing video series, and she said, it sucked. If I go back and look at the first year, it sucked compared to where I'm at now. But had she have not practiced consistently, she wouldn't be where she's at now. She wouldn't have achieved the success and the visibility that she has now.
Yeah. So just, there's a few things I think for women. One is, of course, just do it. But I think one is just changing our mindset around it, because I think people aren't going to do it until they get the confidence to do it, right? They just, women live a lot in their head. I think they're constantly thinking and judging themselves and stopping that. So it's interesting. I think you hear a lot about this in terms of changing mindset, but it's great for women to hear here, which is stop saying sorry. And that is a big problem within women's vocabulary. And I do invite people listening to just take one day and count the number of times that you say sorry. And I think it will astound them how many times it happens. And then 2, the next day, commit to not saying sorry and realize how difficult it is, because that forces you to start to come up with phrases of how to replace sorry with other things, right? Not sorry I'm late, but thank you for waiting, that kind of thing. So I think that's the first thing. I think the other thing is setting boundaries. And it is very hard because women are expected to hold so much not just physically, but mentally. And so setting boundaries for women, I think, is going to be incredibly important. And how do you do that? I think it's blasé for people to just learn to say no. I think they do need to say no, but I think they have to instead even learn how to say yes if.
Mm-hmm.
What I mean by that is when someone asks you, because there are a lot of demands on women where it's very hard societally and culturally and systemically to say no. But saying yes if means if you're going to ask me to do something, we're going to make this not a transaction. It's just going to be a trade-off. So could you do this for me? Yes, if you could do this for me.
Mm-hmm.
And if they say no, you really learn who's important and who's not.
Yes.
Those are some of the things I would suggest, I guess. So I don't know. It's interesting. You were talking about this resilience piece, but I'd also love to tie that into learning, like not just how do we learn to be resilient, but like what are the other things that you think women should learn? What could we teach women to do that goes along with resilience that would really help them be more successful?
Putting self first.
Putting self first.
Mhm.
That's interesting.
I consider myself at an advantage. One, because I am a white woman, but also because
Mhm.
I have made life choices and I don't have children. And I don't have a husband, I have a wife. And that advantage comes from someone who deeply and intimately understands me. And we shared very similar values from the start, which I think is a disadvantage that a lot of women face simply because of the differences between gender and understanding. I'm not saying for a lack of compassion, because I know some really amazing men and amazing husbands, but there is that, women are from Mars, men are from Venus, or, different planets. It's so true, whatever planet it might be from. And I think the other advantage is I don't have youngins needing me. And I just see women reaching a certain age, and I'll say it's usually in their 40s to 50s, where they're so run down and so tired. And it's because they put everybody else first. And that's, again, a societal thing that we are taught that is ingrained in us, is you serve everyone else before you serve yourself. And someone once said to me, if I'm not putting my own oxygen mask on first, I'm no good to anybody, and we're all going down. So
Yeah.
asking yourself, what are the 2 or 3 things that I need to do today for me, even if it's as simple as I'm going to step outside, stand in the sun, and breathe for 2 minutes and just recenter and ask my body, what do I need? We're so disassociated from body that we don't even realize how shallow our breathing is, or that our jaw has been clenched all day. And I say that right now because I just did a scan of myself and my jaw is so incredibly tight. I'm like, oh, maybe that's where my headache is coming from.
Maybe, right?
Becoming
Well,
self-aware.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. So the self-awareness is a good point. I wonder too, like what other things can women do? And I think a lot about like how they are forced at not just at home, but at work to take care of,
Yes.
right? And it's not just that they assume it, right? Because someone will come to you and say, just stop doing it. And the problem is if they stop doing it, it's not going to get done. So we've got to be able to create a system where the expectation isn't that the women are going to do it, right? Like at work, you need to be a boss at work, not a mom. And, as somebody who has 2 children, I think that it does carry over into work. You have this maternal aspect. I guess one of the things I always say to women is, if you could really be the leader that you wanted to be, what would you do differently? And I think about that a lot. And I say, it's not about just leaning in. I lean in all the time. And that's, to me, that is like, I personally have an issue with that phrase, lean in. I lean the hell out of things. But that doesn't mean that it's going to get me anywhere. I actually encourage people, like, if you could do anything, I would just say what I really feel without filtering it. Right. And I'm curious, do you filter yourself in terms of what you say? Or does that, I think it changes as you get older, right?
Yeah.
I mean, to me, I give a lot less Fs as I get older because I'm
yes.
just like, I got nothing else to lose. So, but I think for younger people, it's very hard because women, they spend a lot of time filtering, right? Did you feel that?
So I'm laughing because I don't I lack filters. So recently self-diagnosed as ADHD. And the reason I haven't gone forth with the clinical diagnosis because it's a 2-year wait here. So I just went and did a bunch of surveys, and I'm like, well, if you check the majority of the boxes, survey says, but
So you got to recommend everyone gets ADHD. Maybe that's the way to go.
yeah, well, and it's people with ADHD, typically we lack a filter. And I've always, my grandmother used to say to me, what did you do? Grow up in a barn? I'm a big fan of swear words. And I'm the one who can use the F word for every different, as an adjective, as a verb, and it's, even to the point sometimes where I'm like, maybe I should dial that back. But there is a certain way that types of folks with ADHD show up. And we'll just tell you what we think. I also grew up in a house where my dad's approach to things was, well, if I want your perspective, I'll give it to you. Right. And so, just layers. Right. And so for me, I will be the one in the room to say the things that others won't say. And I also like to be a bit of a, disturber for the purpose of learning, for the purpose of getting around the barrier that I can plainly see is holding a team back, is holding someone back, is I will say the shocking thing to cause that pause, to cause that change in thinking.
How's that perceived?
People either like it or they don't like it. And I'm like, if you don't like it, well, this is me. So happy to refer you to someone else. I am not for everyone. And I know that. And it makes my life significantly easier because I don't have to move around and adapt my systems and processes and who I am for anyone else.
Less filtering, maybe.
Yeah.
That's interesting because I do feel like that's an issue for when we tiptoe around our words versus saying what we really think. And then we get dinged for it because on one hand, if you don't say what you really think and you dance around it, people are saying you're not a strong enough leader. But then if you do say what you really think, it's bitchy. So there is a fine line.
Right? I'm like, go ahead, call me a bitch. Like, and usually that's not the word they use because I show up, I think, in a more masculine format because of where I sit on the gender spectrum, because I came out when I was 19, because I grew up playing with the boys. Barbies were okay, but I wanted the Barbie car and I wanted the and I loved Hot Wheels because I just loved the design of them. And I liked I was more into the Lego and the how do things fit together thing than I was into being girly. I learned how to be girly as a mask so I could show up and be treated as normal or as everyone else. But I just have this really interesting life perspective that because, I didn't choose to be queer, it's just who I am. So I also am a master at being a chameleon, to move around things because I've had to have been to protect. What am I protecting? Right?
What are you protecting? Well, it's interesting because I think there's something to unpack there quickly too, which is, so is the way to get ahead as a woman to be more like a man?
At one time, I would argue yes, but I'm going to turn it back to you. What are your thoughts on that?
So my feeling when I was talking with you, it's interesting because my perspective is, I think one of the traps we fell into probably with our generation, I mean, I'm in my late 50s, so is that that's what was told, especially in the 80s, right? You got to be more like, if you want to get ahead, you got to be more like a guy, but women are dinged when they're more like a guy. And so I think that is a trap. I would not, for me, if I'm counseling a woman right now, I would say that's usually the entry point, right? That kind of gets you in the door. But if we really are going to make steps ahead for women, I think that I don't want to have to behave like someone else. I'm going to behave like me. And that's what I want to be, right? Getting to the authentic. And that might not be like all of the HBR articles and the management consultants and the things that you've been told about what makes leadership in the past. So redefining it is, I don't need to be more like a man to get ahead. I need to be able to be more like me. That's it. So that's that say what you really think kind of thing. And then if you get dinged, you get dinged. I mean, I don't think we're going to get ahead if we just have to act like men.
No, and I
That's gonna
think there is need for pause for women to evaluate what is self, what is my center, because we are told to be so much so often. We are influenced by everything around us. What I just run into, because I work in developing brands and I develop company brands, which are effectively a group of people or a single leader, the visionary, is one of the hardest things to determine is what is my purpose beyond making money?
So how do you determine it? What do you think?
It's a series of questions. Yeah, I mean, it's for me as the facilitator. So one way to create a brand for anything, product, person, company, there's different kinds of brands and nuances of how you do that. But one way to develop a brand is to go do the market research, find out where the hole is or where the biggest space is to take up your own space and plant yourself there. That is very much an external consultant approach to, hey, Lisa, I've done this research on you and your profession and where you want to be centered. But what the market research is showing me is there's a big gap over here. It's adjacent to where you really authentically want to be. But really, we should put it over here because there's a big space for you to own. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is for the consultant, for the person helping you build your brand, is for them to be very curious and to notice the things that light up, to notice the things that are authentically you, and center the brand around your values, your thoughts, your beliefs. Like you said, one of the things you're protecting is your vision. So when you center it around the person, they can do nothing but show up authentically, which is a big thing.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting is that you make a good point, which is defining self, right? So what is meaning to you? And I think that's also defining your character. Like, what is your character? What are your morals? What are your values? And there's a great exercise. I'm sure you've been through it too. I like the river of life exercise. We actually are drawing the river of your life, and from when you were younger, and you kind of map your journey, and you look at what were the dots and what drove me to those things or not. Like, what did I drive those things, or were they driven for me? And that then to me helps, I think, answer a few questions. I would ask 3 questions. If I was listening to this and I was giving advice to a woman here, I would say, first of all, sketch out your life. Like, what were the key milestones and what led you to them? And then I would ask you to define, who am I? And just riff it. Write 3 pages on that. And the reason I say 3 pages is because you want to do it unedited. Mm-hmm. And then the next thing I would say is then, what do I want? And most people go through life not even thinking about that. What do I want? And again, 3-page, do not edit yourself. And then the final question you ask yourself is, what's stopping you? And that's the most important thing, because yes, a lot of it's going to be us, but a lot of them are going to be societal norms. And I think that then gives you a picture of what's been my journey. Who am I? Like characteristics, not just labels. And then what do I want and what's stopping me? Because otherwise we move through life just executing our calendar when we should be moving through life more with a compass. And so those would be the questions I'd ask myself. Let me pause. I don't know if there's others you think that people should ask.
No, I think that's brilliant. I've never come across the river of life exercise, so I love that. And you gave concrete, actionable steps, which I think is super helpful. I'm gonna take a bit of a right turn here for a second, and one of the things contextually that I realize that I want to, because those listening can't see us, is I want to recognize that we are both white women. We are both from a very similar, though I am on the Pacific Coast now, in Vancouver, Canada. You're you said New York State. So give us a little bit of context.
Yeah.
New York. So you're in New York City. So I grew up just north of you, just southwest of Toronto. So if we're talking about hubs of similar being and growing up in a similar vein. So what I want to recognize in that is we both bring privilege, so we have point of view, and
I agree.
we, in recognizing that, I think it's important for those listening to apply their own filters of value to be able to go, is this exercise actually going to work for me? Is it realistic for me as a marginalized woman, as an Indigenous person? How I think it's really important from a resilience standpoint as women leaders that we recognize everybody doesn't have that same place of privilege. Everybody doesn't come at this equally. And I find that white culture in North America very much just assumes and judges very quickly, well, you just should be doing this. So I just wanted to call that out. And then leading to part of the resilience piece is surrounding yourself with people who can be your scaffolding.
Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So I'm curious as to your thoughts.
So I have a phrase I talk a lot about when I will do women's keynotes. So I think you're right. Surrounding yourself with people that are going to support you, and those don't have to be just women, right? Because
100%.
I think a way to change is, I don't think change is going to happen by getting the women to change. It's getting the men to change.
But also, we're talking in the binary here.
True.
And I want to call out America in this moment, through its own leadership, is stripping away the gray. And there are so many people who live not in the binary of male or female, like very feminine, very masculine. Like those are the expectations of a society that lives in the black and the white. And it is very little different here in Canada. So I think I want to reposition that as surrounding yourself with humans who support who you are and your authentic self.
Well, let me say the point I was going to make, which was I think that you're right. Surrounding yourself with people, but we always seem to get into these conversations about we need mentors, and you do. But I think the difference to me is you need mentors for support, but you need sponsors to get ahead. And that's one thing I would say to people listening, which is I don't need any more mentors in my life. I mean, yes, you always need mentors, et cetera. But what I really need is a sponsor. And there's a difference, right? So for the people listening that don't know, a mentor is someone that will help you. They support you, they make you feel good, they give you advice, et cetera. A sponsor is when someone isn't there. They are rooting for you and they are recommending you to get ahead. So that's the difference, right? A mentor might not recommend you. As sponsors, that's their job. And I think a lot of people here, it would be great for you to start to think about who would sponsor you and ask them to do that. Because then you really know if they've got your back or not. So that would be one of my pieces of advice. What would you say?
It's interesting. I'm a visual thinker, so I'm thinking, okay, I'm drawing this diagram, and in my head, there's the mentor, perhaps maybe on the right side, and the sponsor on the left side, and they are at the top of. I'll come back to that visual of scaffolding. And one of the most fascinating scaffoldings I've ever seen was when I was in Macau in Asia, and they build scaffolding out of bamboo, and I was like, whoa, what? And to me, that seemed less safe. But if you think about bamboo's ability to flex and its forgiveness.
Interesting.
And then go to what do I mean by scaffolding? Having people around you that are your scaffolding. That was a really fascinating concept introduced to me by a leadership coach. And it's really about who are the people around you who will hold you up when it gets windy, who will hold you steady when the storm hits, who are just that they are there. Simply just knowing that people are there supporting you, on top of having these powerhouses of mentors and sponsors, that's really powerful.
Yeah. So building that network is a really important thing for people to do, starting immediately. Andrew was asking us this question of, we get a lot of mentoring, but where do we find the sponsors, right? And or where do we find these people? And it's, to me, you're right. Like the circle or the scaffolding to me isn't just people in work. I mean, it's all around you, right? It can be experts that have nothing to do with it. It could be authors that I read about, people that give TED Talks. I don't know. But I will say, like, building that scaffolding, I want to get a great group of people that are the usual and unusual suspects that can give me advice that I like and won't like, by the way. But then making sure that I also have sponsors that are getting me, it's not just an exercise in futility, right? Where, I've got all this. People love to give advice. That's easy. Advice is super. Where do you get one of Andrew's questions is, where do you get the sponsors? And I think the sponsors is a really great exercise in being bold, because you have to ask for them. You have to ask. You have to identify.
Traditionally, what women are terrible at is asking.
That's right. So who are the people that have the power, right? Or have the influence? That's really what it is the influence that can get you to what you want. And so that's why I think you define what you want, and then you find the people that have it. And then you ask them to sponsor it.
And I circle right back to your exercise, the River of Life exercise, where you do say, what's getting in my way, what's stopping me is, and what do I want, what's stopping me? Going back to those things, when you're afraid to ask, when you feel bad about asking, when you say, I shouldn't be asking, is, well, if this is what you want, I always say, don't ask, don't get. If you don't ask, you don't get, and you might get a no, but then you can move on to the next ask, the next person. Who else is in my scaffolding that could help me with this?
So this is really, I like this in terms of the scaffold. Well, this kind of brings us back right to resilience, which is, it's not going to work the first time. And that's why you need to build such good scaffolding, because those are the people that are going to help you be resilient when you're down. Right. So, I don't know, let's talk about like our last piece of advice for the people listening about resilience. Like, they can do one thing to be more resilient. What do you think? I mean, I'll tell you mine, which I think is, one, I'll give you two. One, I loved how you talked about learning to fall, because if we learn how to fall better, then we'll get back up. So I really thought that was great about what you said. The other thing I would say around resilience is, what is the thing that absolutely, if you didn't do, and you look back at the end of your life and you didn't do it, you would be deeply saddened by? And so that to me shows me where I'm going to put all my resilience into, because you can't do everything.
No, I agree. That comes to intentional steps. Coming back to practice, my advice is, where do you want to get to? What are the steps you need to take that you might trip and fall? You might not execute perfectly the first time, but with practice, it will come. And it's that whole age-old analogy of learning to drive the car. And if you were, our generation, learning to drive a stick, how clunky was that when we first started? It was just terrible. You're thinking about all the things, and your foot has to go here, and what gear am I in? And your brain was just ready to explode. And now we just, for those of us that drive, we just get in the car and drive and do it. So practice makes more practice, which inherently makes you better. So what do you want? What do you need to do to get there? And what is the practice you're willing to commit to every day to get there?
I love it. Intentionality. Carly, you are so great. Thank you for having this conversation.
Agreed. I couldn't have been more excited to jump into basically a blind date. So this was fabulous. I think we're very well matched. So well done, Andrew, for choosing to put us in the same room.
Oh, so good to meet you, Carly.
You as well.
Our resilience was tested in this episode. 100 episodes in, and 15 minutes into the recording, we realised that we weren't, in fact, recording. As was so beautifully put in the episode, we fell down, but we got back up again. An enormous thank you to both Carly and Lisa for their time and engaging conversation, and recognising that things go wrong, and they were happy to go again. Their contact details are in the show notes, along with links to our website, future episodes, and to our donation page. We'll be back in a couple of weeks again, and next time it's the upskilling one. As always, thanks for listening, and we'll see you again soon.